Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.
Hello, welcome to Champions of Psychology, a show with the goal of openly talking about mental health and gaming presented by Codename Entertainment and TakeThis.org. Every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on twitch.tv/CNE Games, or later on your favorite podcast service, Mitra, Jordan, and Raffael Boccamazzo, aka Dr. B, talk about mental health in these unprecedented times, as well as how gaming affects us. If you hear this live in the chat, you can leave a question that I, Treavor Bettis, will ask them later in the show. Our topic today is nostalgia, but before we get to that, Mitra, Dr. B, who are you for the fine folks who may not know?
So I'm a therapist practicing in Victoria, British Columbia. I work in private practice and I work with couples and individuals. I do family therapy, and I often end up talking about games and how games can bring people and people together, and adult parents closer to their children. So yeah, and I noticed that, Trevor, you said every Tuesday at 11. And so
oh God, yeah, it's Tuesday at noon. Oh my God, sorry, it's gonna take me a little bit. My apologies.
My goodness.
He's nostalgic for 11.
Oh my God.
Times were simpler an hour ago.
See, on my screen, it seemed like the audio desync wasn't that bad, but Jay has just alerted me that it is a bit more noticeable than usual, so apologies. I literally updated everything I could think of. I'm going to find a physical manifestation of XSplit today, and I'm probably going to hurt it. So I apologize for the desync. I'm going to really try. I'm gonna try and switch programs. I think is
Champions of Psychology does not advocate violence.
Yeah, please. Yeah. Just, you know, I'm not happy with it. Dr. B, who are you?
Apparently, the voice of the disclaimer is who I am.
Please consult a doctor before harming XSplit.
Wait, not this kind of doctor. So I am a non-practicing doctor of clinical psychology. I am the clinical director over at TakeThis.org, which was the first mental health nonprofit to serve the game community. Our mission is all about destigmatizing and educating on mental health matters within our game community, hence why I'm here, because I'm a gamer, you're a gamer, we're all a gamer. Oh God, now I'm going into Toys R Us Kids. I'm gonna get boy, nostalgia all over the place. I'm also an expert on the applied use of games and apparently a font of pop culture knowledge that comes out at inappropriate times.
Big mood.
It's going to come out a lot today.
Yes.
Yeah, my goal.
Not necessarily inappropriately.
Well,
just generally.
I think with this nostalgia thing, I need to reveal one of my life goals. And that is to be Grandpa Simpson. That one of my goals.
Just yelling at clouds.
No, not yelling at clouds, but the Grandpa Simpson who tells long-winded stories that don't go anywhere. I want to have grandkids and tell them about the time I tied an onion to my belt, which was the style at the time. Because you see, I was taking the ferry to the San Juan Islands, and the ferries in those days only cost $5. And those days, $5 had a picture of a bee on them. And yeah,
oh, this is going to be fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about this episode.
So
I just got way more excited.
Couldn't get the white onions because of the war.
Personally, like to braid the green ones. Thank you. Thank you. And wear them as a necklace. It's fresh. It's less garlicky.
Hashtag fresh. So, you know, as we do with most of our shows, I think it's good to start with a definition. What do we mean when we're saying nostalgia? Like, how are we defining that?
Well, we're gonna. So it's interesting. The definition of nostalgia has changed over the centuries. Okay, originally, in I believe the 16th century, when it was coined, it was the name of a sickness, specifically applied to Swiss mercenaries. It was based on the Greek nostos, which meant homecoming, and algos, which meant either ache or pain. So it was this longing for home that was considered a variant of melancholy. But over the centuries, it has come to mean a sort of wistful longing for the past, that a lot of us can think about events in our life with fondness and memories. I think of certain events in my teens and my early 20s with a certain amount of joy, and maybe even a longing to have those kind of times again. Oh my God. Oh, that is, I give my pun crown to whoever just said that in the chat.
What was it?
So nostalgia isn't what it used to be. I bow.
Yes, that's really
Well done.
well done.
That was a safe
we
2.
got some witty ones today. Yeah.
Well done indeed. Okay, so I totally lost my train of thought there.
Good night, everyone.
Yeah, no, we're done. Yeah,
you just won the internet.
Yeah. Yeah, no, geez. So that, that's what nostalgia came from. How did it change? Like, do we know why it changed?
I mean, language just, I don't know exactly why, but I can speculate. Language just changes over time. I mean, at this point, thanks to Rob Lowe and Parks and Recreation, the word literally can now mean literally or figuratively.
Oh,
which
God.
just baffles me.
So yes, you cannot predict how language is going to change, but I think this piece around coming home is still pretty significant, because like familiarity, that which we grew up around, or that which we loved, or that which relates to when we're young or not so young. Anyway, yes. Familiarity and missing it when things change, or missing parts of ourself that we connected to because now we're different, or now we don't get to be that self in this present moment.
Yeah.
I was young and beautiful once.
Like that.
You're going to hear that voice a lot today, I think.
I'm here for it. I'm here for it.
I was once young.
So how does... Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. He's enacting grandpa. Just great. Keep going.
How does nostalgia apply today, and specifically in the terms that we're going to be talking about?
Well, okay. So in looking at some of the research that's been done on this, one of the consistent things that was brought up is the idea that this wistfulness about our past can connect us to who we are now. And if there's congruence in that, like who we are and who we've become, there are positive psychological benefits. And if her work is going with the same theme, my God. And I mean, people are already bringing up some of the stereotypes in the chat that I kind of wanted to, that I think we're going to end up talking about, back in my day when children had respect. No, they didn't. Read newspapers.
Yeah, they may have been a little less overt at times about their form of rebellion or lack of respect, but the fact is every generation has wanted to be authentic to themselves, whatever that may mean, and they want to differentiate from their parents' generation in some way or another. So that is part of it. And what are manners anyway? Okay, you two are like.
I was thinking, can I actually point out a vicious schwa fork? And actually, I can't. But that's only because I'm a kitchen snob. And also, vicious schwa forks are really useful for getting out seafood bits. So I mean, it's kind of what they're for. But I'm thinking about this, and It's a really interesting fact. It's a really interesting thing that nostalgia can anchor us to certain places and time, and it can help give us a sort of existential meaning, because of course how we remember the past influences who we are as a person today, whether that's in conjunction with the past or in reaction to. Like there's I'll just call myself out on this. There's a lot of stuff that was not great in my childhood. And you know, there's a certain stereotype of why people go into mental health, and in certain respects I fall into that. You know, being an undiagnosed autistic kid, I went into this field because I don't want kids to grow up the way I grew up, being ostracized and feeling not included. And so subsequently, a lot of the hobbies I had at the time, I can get wistful for, because they were my refuge. They were my solace. They were the thing that I escaped all the pain of my everyday life to get into. But I don't know if any of you have tried playing the original Mega Man recently. It is harder than I remember it.
It's so hard.
It was punishingly brutal then. It is worse now.
Specifically with that, like, one of the things that I realized, because, you know, like, I remember as a kid, you know, playing some of these games for so long, and then when you actually look at how much game there is there, like taking all difficulty out, like just level by level and everything, they're not that long. They lasted that long because they were brutally hard, and just everyone has a
speed tunnel.
And yeah, everyone's just like, oh yeah, no, I loved that game, but like compared to like even Dark Souls now, it's so punishing.
Exactly.
But yeah, oh, I'm sorry, Mitra.
No, please go on. You guys are in a beautiful little
well, and this let's actually bring that up, because this is something I know you want to talk about. That now here Treavor and I are connecting over a shared experience, and there you are just going, yep, let them have their moment.
Absolutely. It's not my shared experience, but I enjoy the fact that you're connecting over it and that it's significant to the two of you. And I think this is a piece around nostalgia. Who is able to join in those moments, and who isn't. And so one of the things we were going to talk about was culture and nostalgia, and that piece around, particularly if you're an immigrant or from an immigrant family, if you're from the diaspora of your culture, you first of all know that you can't go home. That going home means entering a culture that didn't exist when you left, and therefore is now different, has evolved in its own way, and you also have evolved. So as anyone who's moved to a different country knows, our experiences change us, and we can be nostalgic for something but not necessarily return to it, and we might also not be able to connect with the broader culture around us initially, right, and share in their culture. We may want to, but we may have very different experiences, and many different things that create nostalgia. But there are films that, you know, I got to experience at the same time as people everywhere else in the world. And of course, right now, the world is so much more global. So we can have these shared experiences now much more than we could when I was a kid. Yeah.
Well, and I think you're bringing up something really important, Mitra, because there are differences in terms of like personal nostalgia versus historical nostalgia.
Absolutely.
And when the three of us first started talking about this topic, it was interesting to think about what shaped us in our personal lives in terms of interpersonal experiences just within ourselves, and versus intrapersonal experiences that we had with other people. And we can talk about, well, let me take that back a moment. Thinking about how certain historical experiences that we take for granted as just expected or normal. If I start quoting Anchorman, am I going to be the only one who's with it, or is this going to be something that you also experienced and enjoyed, Mitra? Same thing with like Super Troopers or movies, aka the original memes, kids. When you had to just quote movies for like 3 months.
I remember about that.
See, I'm doing it in real life. I'm like, yeah, back in my day.
Back in my day.
We had to just quote movies incessantly.
We did. We did. Absolutely.
And then if someone didn't get it and you were like, oh, it was this really awesome movie that was just in theaters, wait like 9 months and you'll be able to see it at home, maybe if you rented a Blockbuster.
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah.
I feel like now we're getting into like South Park territory of member berries. Member berries.
Oh,
remember when Blockbusters were a thing?
Oh, yes, I do. Actually, I just recently, I saw, this is into the nostalgia thing. Someone was so nostalgic for Blockbuster, they found out that on eBay, people are selling the clamshell cases from, like, that had the VHSs in them, so they bought a bunch of them and put them on their shelves. And I'm like, that's amazing.
Okay, that full on makes me feel old. Absolutely. I mean, right there, which I think is an effect nostalgia can absolutely have on one.
Yeah.
It can create a sense of togetherness, and sometimes when we're nostalgic about something that others don't share the same way, it can create a sense of separateness too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it can create for good and for ill a sense of group cohesion, which is, you know, one of the things I was alluding to and talking about a sense of historical nostalgia.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you experience this, you're clearly a member of, you know, my group.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
oh yeah, it's like although that's like those freaking Facebook posts is like, if you don't remember this, you were, and it's just like, oh God, can we stop with that? I hate those.
Well, I mean, it's really interesting as a sort of mild social experiment for me to go into a certain Facebook group that is about the neighborhood in which I grew up. And it is, I remember, you know, insert neighborhood before it was cool. And it's often a bunch of, up until recently, it was a bunch of people in their 60s and 70s reminiscing on stuff no one else cared about. But unfortunately, now it's the people I grew up with who are talking about how much better the neighborhood was back then. And I'm like, listen, it was cool and all, but we got handmade noodles now. I can walk there, and that's great. I just got to get there early enough so they don't sell out and then close, because that's what they do.
Yeah, I will say I find the food so much better in my city right now, and it's because of this. It's because there's more diversity in the city, and there's been changes, and so there's also more interesting food. And I am not super nostalgic about the lack of that.
Yeah.
You know, before.
Oh yeah, no,
So,
like, oh, go
on.
Well, what I was gonna say is like it reminds me of, like, you know, when I was like 5 years out of high school or anything like that, and someone would be like, oh, don't you miss high school? I'd be like, absolutely not. And not in any way, shape, or form. God, no. Where it, like, some people like related on that, and I absolutely did. I'm like, I do not have nostalgia for that in any way. And I do think that sometimes when you don't have nostalgia for something that you were present for, the people that do have nostalgia kind of look at you weird. And it's like, but why not?
Yeah.
And it's like, because it didn't resonate with me. And in high school, it's freaking terrible. Like, you know, if it was a show or something that's like, oh yeah, I remember that being on, but I didn't really watch it. How did you not watch it? And it's like, easy, I changed the channel.
Yeah. There was a knob and it went click.
Yeah, oh God. There was a big box that you went ka-chunk and it changed. But yeah, there was something that I wanted to kind of steer the conversation to, because it was a question that came up that we did actually want to talk about, and I want to give credit to the person that asked it. Monkey House said, question, are there common differences in nostalgia tied to gender?
Definitely.
I mean, I didn't find anything in the cursory research that I did, but I want to preface it with I did, you know, I this is not like I wrote a term paper on this. So Did fairly cursory research on this topic. But I know Mitra has a lot to say on this.
I do, and for several reasons, not just because I was born female and my pronouns are she, her, but because that's actually a fairly new thing to say. And just even in saying that, I know it can make people uncomfortable to hear me say, hey, I recognize I was born female. My initials are she, her, and not everyone who is born female stays with those same initials, right? And this is a very new thing. You know, when I was in my teens, the first group of gay teenagers was sort of becoming more common. Many of them were also being thrown out of their homes.
And when you say more common, you mean more public?
I mean more public. That's what I mean. It was more, actually, no, I also mean it was more common to come out in your teens for the first time.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, there were a lot of people prior to that who were closeted until they were adults, out of their family homes, for example, able to live life on their own terms, right? It wasn't so common to come out in your teens when you were still vulnerable to your families, right? It's still not so common to come out as a trans person because you are still vulnerable to your families. We are in the first generation of kids who are coming out early. Now, that's not what this show is about, but what this show is about is looking at generationally what's common and what's not, what do we yearn for, what do we miss? And from a gender perspective, this is a huge one. From a gender and sexuality perspective as well, in terms of having a little more safety and freedom in the world, right? In terms of also not necessarily being a white person. Because when we talk about nostalgia in North American society, and from a Eurocentric place, what we're often talking about is straight, white, cis. And then if we get into gender and female versus male advantages, we're talking about women having fewer advantages in the world, and certainly non-straight and non-cis people having even fewer. So when we talk about going back to a simpler time, we need to really consider who we're leaving out of the conversation, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and it's even thinking about I mean, let me start over again. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, a lot of the times when we think about, you know, better times through the lens of dominant culture, it is through that cis white male lens in North America. And we were talking about this, and that the how uptight a lot of those times were. And it's when we think about that through that historical lens that ignores so many of the cultural complexities that existed when it, you know, redlining, being repressed in terms of your gender identity, being repressed in terms of sexual identity, being repressed in terms of all sorts of stuff. That stuff gets left out. And there was a study that was done, I think in 2012, on recollections of apartheid in South Africa, and it was the same thing. You had a very clear split on who was remembering things how. And some people remembered it as a really great time. Well, guess which group of people that was? Others remembered it as a time of a lot more complexity. Right. And that's where you run into problems with nostalgia, is the selective remembrance, because people, we don't tend to remember things the way they actually happened. We remember things the way they fit our narratives.
Right. I'm going to address something in the chat that I just noticed right now. Folks, there is nothing wrong with being straight, white, and cis. And our culture makes it way easier to be straight, white, and cis.
Yup.
That's the piece that is relevant here, is the piece around privilege. If you are straight, white, and cis, you in this world do have more privilege. It may not always feel like it, I totally get that. Of course, you can be rejected from work. Of course, all of this. And yeah, but it's up to you to educate yourself to better understand this question, which is not what today's show is about. But I wanted to address it because, of course, we are talking about gender and we are talking about nostalgia. And we are, of course, also talking about culture. So.
So obviously, like, there is problems with nostalgia as well. Like, it's not just, like, a lot of people have like, oh, nostalgia is so great. Like, I miss the old days of watching 80s cartoons. And, like, funny enough, like, 80s cartoons kind of like sparked the idea for this one because, like, honestly, if you go back and watch them, they're not great. Like, they're great to remember.
Really
they're great
not.
to, like I would not at all tell my nephews that are like 10 and whatnot, go watch the 80s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They're like, no, I have new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Why would I go back and watch those? Because they don't have the connection that I do. And I'm not going to have the connection that they do. And neither will the next generation have the connection with their Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Well, we're looking at those. I mean, you and I were talking about this, Treavor, and I used to love the movie Mystery Men.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when it came out in 1998.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I loved it at the time. I was also watching it through a teenage lens, and I understood it through a teenage lens. I actually recently went and rewatched the movie Mystery Men with a friend of mine who was a film school graduate and also an expert on feminist history and theory, and it was enlightening, to say the least. To watch that movie with my friend who was an expert on this topic. And you know, she's just going through like, yeah, here's this and this and this and this. And I'm like, ooh, yeah, things I couldn't have spotted when I was 17.
Yeah.
And now looking, you know, I remember that through the lens of having a 17-year-old's understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm watching it with a more complex understanding. I'm like, yep, nope, fair play to you. I can't just have a rosy lens around that movie or other movies or other TV shows.
Yeah, the social milieu is really interesting because we take for granted whatever it is in terms of those messages that we grow up around too. So sometimes I'll watch something now and be like, ooh, that really didn't age well. You know, there was a bunch of
Friends,
you know, anti-feminist or homophobic or transphobic or whatever, you know, the sorts of jokes or whatever it is, right? That, you know, in some ways, I can still relate to what maybe it meant to me then, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But I recognize how I've changed now. And that's good.
Yeah.
That's positive. That's not just progress, but that's also interesting to notice about the self. And so in that way, we can still sort of recognize from a nostalgia perspective what something meant to us at the time that we were engaging with it, why it was fun, how our friends and us, how we connected over it, all of that. And yet we can still look at it and go, yeah, okay. You know, maybe I'm not passing this one forward. You know, maybe I'm not really sort of saying, hey kids, come sit down and watch the show, because it's not going to mean the same thing to them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of, especially media, it's anchored in the zeitgeist of its time. And if we want to watch shows like, I mean, God, Married with Children. Oh my God. If for those of you who have, if anybody has ever gone back and watched Married with Children, I just started rewatching the first season just for giggles. And oh my God, it is such a relic of its time. 1987.
Yeah.
And it was this subversive, thing at the time. Now it's just cringeworthy.
Oh, it's so, yeah, it is extremely cringy.
Yeah,
no, and that's like definitely something that nostalgia does, where like like I have the memories of enjoying it. Like that's kind of like the thing that I usually hold on to. It's the memory of enjoying it and a few memories from the show that I really loved. And and yeah, the stuff that would now today be problematic, I don't remember and I don't think about until I do go back and watch it and go, oof.
Yeah.
Oh no.
How far we've come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, there's stuff still where it's just like, oh yeah, no, I really loved that one. And someone will be like, oh, except for all of the trans jokes. I go, the what? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yep.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mitra.
I was just going to say, I think that being able to have conversations with younger people who didn't grow up with this material is so great. You know, I think that being able to sort of really talk it through and enjoy it and sort of share what was enjoyed and what isn't now or what's different. The other thing that's really interesting sometimes is these remakes that are coming up. You know, if you think about the She-Ra remake, for instance, it's pretty fascinating to look at what the original was like and what the remake is like and what that actually says about culture. You know, which parts of that work, what did or didn't resonate with you, what happens as you watch it, what do you think about this older version, you know? Those are some great conversations that can happen. But I also want to mention other kinds of personal nostalgia that can be really great. For example, my family grew up making all kinds of Alice in Wonderland jokes, the original Lewis Carroll books, not the Disney version. And had all, you know, it was kind of, there was a bunch of sort of quoting Jabberwocky appropriately and inappropriately sometimes about rabbit holes and mushrooms and all sorts of things. And we thought it was, you know, we thought it was pretty hilarious. And I still think that's pretty fun. And it's kind of a family thing that we enjoyed over the years and could reference. My mom, my aunt, my grandfather, when he was alive, I think he and my grandmother started it. And it became this sort of shared generational joke. And also kind of, you know, I always enjoyed Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass particularly, and can still quote Jabberwocky. And so there's a real
better than I
that.
can, which is impressive.
Well, I got to do something better than you can.
Oh, you do so much better than I do.
We have so much fun together. And so, and it's something that my kids, some of them enjoyed as well. So that kind of thing, you know, that's really got less to do with the culture around us and more to do with sort of family and jokes and stuff that are also nostalgic for each of us, I think.
Let's take a quick break to remind our viewers and listeners of our disclaimer, and then we'll be back to talk a little bit more. So be right back. Maybe. Nope, the button didn't work. Now the button will work.
Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.
Okay, so what other points about nostalgia do we want to hit? Because we've talked about the good, we've talked about the bad. I think. Well, I'm gonna leave it to you. What else do you guys want to talk about?
Gosh, boy, we've been kind of all over the place with this, haven't we? Well, let's. Do we want to talk about some of the benefits, Mitra?
I think so.
We've talked a lot about some of the challenges and some of the pitfalls, but do we want to talk about the benefits?
Yeah, Absolutely. I think that's a more balanced and nuanced perspective on this topic, which, you know, we tend to like that.
So I know this is something that you have a lot of thoughts on, meaning making.
Mm-hmm.
How does nostalgia contribute to meaning?
So nostalgia can, I think, primarily what I notice certainly with clients as well is through the lens of the meaning an event or experience has for me and the identity that I have attached to that, the parts of the self that come out. And nostalgia, or the kind of media that we look at, or the things that bring up nostalgia, whether it's an old birthday card from 20 years ago or a love letter from however long ago or something, what that brings up about where I was at the time, right? It's kind of like, you know how scent can take you right back? And that can be a nostalgic experience for sure, not just what's in the media, but there's some very personal experiences that we are nostalgic about. And it's really useful to kind of examine those and connect with those parts of ourselves. So if we have a kind of shortcut via nostalgia to those parts of the self, and we can be connected to them, maybe we can also bring them into the present moment. So that's kind of useful for us to be able to do. So it can not just be about, it can be about that sort of yearning for something that is lost, but it can also be a reflection on the ways in which that we're still the same person. And it can be a way to carry forward aspects of the self that we love and that we don't want to lose or lose touch with, or we want to get back to in some important way.
Yeah, what like we talked earlier about, like, you know, if the pose, like, if you don't remember this, then you're blah blah blah. But at the same time, though, that sort of nostalgia, if you share it with someone, like, I found that is a fun way to get to know someone, where it's like, hey, did you watch this when you were a kid? And, you know, if they say no, it's okay, because we've talked about it in the episode that we touched on, like, gatekeeping, where it's like, how could you not have started that? It's like, don't have that reaction. That's not, it's not how you react. That's not how that's not how you make friends.
Nope.
But yeah, like if it turns out that, like, we have some shared nostalgia for something in the past, where someone's just like, oh man, the GameCube was such a good system. Oh my god, I loved the GameCube. Are you kidding me? That is always a great way to connect. It is one of my favorite ways to connect, because it's having such a good memory about something, and the other person has such a good memory about something, that it's a good conversation. But yeah, definitely don't do the other way.
No, I mean, we talked about that it's way more inclusive, just to be like, yo, this is awesome.
Yeah.
You get to experience this for the first time. How
for
fantastic.
some things.
Yes. I'm excited for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that in that episode. But one of the things I would caution people about is just, this is going to be really ironic, remember that memory is weird. And like, truly, as people, we don't remember things, generally speaking, the way they actually happened. We remember things in a way that fit a narrative.
Yeah.
And there's been lots of research done on this, on the inconsistency of, like, eyewitness testimony and so forth, and how it's prone to bias and errors and so forth. And nostalgia and our longing for the past is no different.
Yeah.
Our nostalgia and longing for the past is really no different. And
I think a good way that's, you know, relevant to, like, the part of gaming that we talk about here is, how many times has a game been remastered or remade, and the like general consensus is, it looks how I remember it looking.
Yeah.
Like, you don't remember The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time looking the way it did. I bet you remember how it looked on the 3DS. Like, you don't remember all of the little pixels in the faces and everything like that. I vividly remember everyone saying that. And we can't even remember the games that we love how they looked.
Our memories are skewed. And
Yeah.
so I would caution people that if you're feeling a sense of longing and nostalgia for whatever, and we all do, enjoy it for what it is, but no, it's not a complete picture. There's a lot more complexity to it than that. There's a lot more stuff that you probably aren't thinking about, not remembering. There's other people's experiences, other people's perspectives. Like every time I hear someone say, "Oh, I really wish I could go back to the 1960s because it was free love and safe sex," and oh wait, no, it wasn't. Free love and all that stuff, and And I'm thinking about the experiences I had, the experiences certain people in my life have had who were activists for civil rights at the times. Their experiences were very different.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Than the free love folks in San Francisco in 1968.
Yeah. There are definitely some aspects of nostalgia that are really about the fantasy of how we wish the world was. And, that's a legitimate fantasy in the sense that we have a hope and desire and a yearning for things to be different at times. And, we can, I think we are thinking about nostalgia here in terms of either lived experience or the lived experience of family members. But there's also the nostalgia of wanting to go back to a time long before our time. Sometimes people will talk about wishing for a simpler time, before there was electricity and technology and all of these kinds of things. And it's difficult to imagine what the reality of all that might have been like, right? And how difficult life might have been for people at that time. So when we draw upon these ideas of nostalgia and maybe drawing on literature or history, we're often leaving out the parts that were that challenging. Just as in our own memories, when we're drawing upon experiences of games we've played or things we've read or movies, whatever, we're engaging with a memory. And we're engaging with our current perception of that memory, which is why it's so skewed, which is okay. But for us to recognize the skew can be useful. So, but, for us to just also enjoy that was our history and that's what this one experience meant to us, that's important too.
And sometimes things do hold up. Sometimes the experiences do hold up. But one of the other things to consider is that sometimes it's not the actual piece of media or the activity itself that we're nostalgic for. It's the feelings that were brought up in the presence of others.
Yeah.
Like people are talking about certain games in the chat, and I've still got my copy of Mario Kart for the Super Nintendo. I tried playing it recently. The graphics they were great at the time.
Yep.
They were amazing. They were groundbreaking at the time. That mode 7 was all the rage.
That's me with the N64 version. I remember booting that thing up 15 years after the fact and be like, I don't remember these being sprites.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was what it was. And it's not the game itself is pretty good still. But really what I'm nostalgic for is the moments and the people I was playing that with.
Yes.
Definitely.
To be able to go to my friend's house after school and play them and get annihilated in battle mode because I was not great.
Yeah. Snowed in with the N64 and the Mario slip sliding away snowman route over and over again.
Slappers only GoldenEye.
Yeah.
Someone put GoldenEye into the chat. 100%.
And Turok was hilarious. You could make
I forgot about Turok
or red.
I actually GoldenEye, man. I remember coming back to that game my later teens after playing like Halo and whatnot for so long. And I remember getting into the game. I'm like, all right, how do I look down? What? Why is this forward? All right, so it's getting to the point where we're gonna check in with the chat. Is there any last things that either of you want to touch on before we do that?
Nostalgia, like a lot of other things, has its ups and downs. Just please remember that it's often more complex than we think it is, and it can be used to. Nostalgia can be used to both give us a link to our past and give us hope for the future, but it can also be mobilized to create divisions and in groups and out groups, and we've seen that throughout history. So just remember, there's ups and downsides, and there's complexities like anything else.
And I would ask too that if you find yourself, this is kind of a little bit of a therapeutic question, but it's kind of handy. If you find yourself yearning for a time, right, or an experience that you feel is missing in your life now, that's useful information for you about what you want to create next, what you've lost, what you've missed, what you maybe need to grieve, and what you need to create in a new way in your life now. So, yeah.
All right, let's see what chat has been up to. Reaver1 comes in and says, so nostalgia switched from longing for a physical home to longing for a metaphorical home of the heart and our comfort past. Yeah.
Well
That's
said.
100%.
That's a really touching way of putting it.
Yeah.
Well said, Reaver. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Herkwork says, I would say the most important aspect of understanding is that the thing or the moment has more oh, I cannot read. I apologize.
Oh, should we do interpretive dance?
Yeah,
Like
just
over the question over the questions, like this empty cup.
So let me try this over. Hardware. I would say the most important aspect of understanding is that the thing or moment has to be important to the person. So that's it's very much true. Like it's if it's not a thing that they resonated with, they're of course not going to have nostalgia for it. Like they could have been alive for it. Like here's a great one. I remember late high school. Really loving Rocky Horror Picture Show. Like I just absolutely loved that one. And
who doesn't?
Funny enough, this whole show is pretty much let's do the time warp. But it blew my mind when I talked to my mom about it, who was alive when that movie came out, and like it became this big, cult classic thing, and she never heard of it. And I was like, really? And she's like, yeah. I think I may have heard of it in passing, didn't know it was a big thing. And that's just how it is. It wasn't important to her. It wasn't a big thing in her group of friends, so she didn't have any connection to it. Let's see. Real Bunny Beast, we had to quote movies, uphill, through the snow, both ways.
Yes. Darn right.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Safe too. I think it's safe or it's Sife. I'm sorry. You're the one that had the amazing nostalgia joke there.
I give my pun crown to Sife too.
Yep. I have nostalgic moments, but they can go two ways. Sometimes it's just great to sit and reminisce about places I used to live, where I went to school, etc. But sometimes it gets overtaken by the thoughts, I wish I could go back there and move forward with the knowledge I have now. I could do so much better. Nostalgia is a double-edged sword. 100%.
100%.
Oh my
Nailed
God.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of the most difficult aspects of nostalgic experience, in my opinion. Yeah. That longing to go back there, and with the experience, this is the great paradox of getting older, actually.
Yeah. No, there's plenty of times where that line of thought leads me down to that. I was like, oh man, if I could have, I'm so nostalgic for that moment, but man, if I had done that one thing different. Yeah. Those thoughts suck. Let's see. This is grungy gelfling.
Appreciate that name.
That's a good one. That's a really good one. As a parent, I've been excited to share things from my childhood with my kids. But wow, there's more than a few things that just aren't right. Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a reason old episodes of The Muppet Show and Looney Tunes have to have disclaimers on them now.
Lauren brought that up in the chat. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Well, I mean, we're at this interesting point that media across generations is more widely available and available more democratically than it ever has been before. And so now the stuff that we couldn't be exposed to as readily, we didn't have as much access to, is available for everybody. And over the last, now 100 years of media, and we're looking at it through a modern lens. And through a modern lens, Looney Tunes isn't great.
No.
I mean, yeah, it's got its great moments and it's got great nostalgia things, but it also has extremely problematic and messed up things happening in it. Actually, the next comment from Monkey House is very relevant to that, which is the ability for younger generations to have immediate access to old content without the relevant cultural context is ultimately pretty damaging, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I think that context is everything, and being able to sort of share things as the older generation here in this picture, being able to share things from my generation or our generations is useful in terms of helping people understand where we were at the time. So, yeah.
Let's see. Herkwork says, what's the difference between nostalgia and general memories? I've always felt that they have a ton of overlap. And I mean, I'm not obviously the professional here, but I would say one of them sparks a really good emotional reaction. And the other one is that time that I, sat on a bench and ate my lunch in elementary school.
Yeah. Please.
Go on.
No, please.
If that particular bench is sparking off a feeling of loneliness or sadness, because that was all the times I ate lunch at that bench by myself, because all my close friends were in the other class and they organized their lunch because I had been put in this class, I couldn't have lunch with them. If it brings up stuff like that, then it's more than nostalgia. It's, it's a strong reaction for something that's not yet healed. Sorry, thought I'd play with that one for you. But yeah, sometimes it's a strong positive memory, of course, if it's evoking something for you, right? As opposed to just being something you remember that's not super significant to your current thinking.
Well, I think that is where we're gonna have to end today's episode. We got Bardic Inspiration coming up pretty closely after this, so I think starting the outro now is great. Thank you everybody for asking questions and putting your thoughts into the chat. Sorry if I didn't get a chance to read them. But Mitra, Dr. B, where can people find you on the interwebs if they would like to do so?
At mitrajordan.com, and of course here at Mitra Jordan on Twitter. So unlike me, of course, Dr. B is available all over the place.
Damn around.
He's around.
No, you can find me on most socials at the Dr. B, TheeDoctorB as in boy. And additionally, make sure to follow Take This org across pretty much all the platforms. Yeah, you can find me on most places too, but Take This is really the place to go for all the mental health stuff that I tend to do. I mean, but also here every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Pacific time.
Except this is the last episode of the season, so not next week.
Yeah,
that's a good
Treavor.
time.
Yeah.
It's a good time to come in. This is the season finale of season 3. We are going to take some time off and come up with a new list of shows to talk about. So if you do have any suggestions for mental health topics that you would like us to talk about on this show, let us know. You can tweet at any of us. You can tweet at Idle Champions. You can send it in via email to championspsychology@codenameentertainment.com. We'd really love to see what you all would want us to talk about.
Wait a minute, but Treavor,
Absolutely.
that's because we need their help to find out what the next season is for.
Oh, God dang it. You're still not getting the crown back for that one. You can find me on the Difficulty Class podcast every Friday, as well as on Champions of Lore every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on twitch.tv/CNE Games. And you can also find me on Twitter at the Treavor. There is an A hiding in there. Thank you to Jay for moderating in the chat today and doing an amazing job. And thank you to Codename Entertainment and Take This for giving us an opportunity to have these discussions. If you missed any part of the show today, look for the podcast tomorrow, because I'm not going to be editing it today. I'm extremely busy. I apologize. Tomorrow, though, I promise. But yeah, if you're in the chat right now, hang out. We got Bardic Inspiration starting in a little bit, and they're going to be doing a really cool song that I think y'all are going to like. And, you know, maybe if you weren't looking at Twitter during this episode for the All Champions Scout, maybe go check that out. Maybe there's something cool to happen.
I wasn't looking at Twitter during our show.
Yeah, no, you know.
I should hope you weren't.
Exactly. But yeah, like I said, this is the season finale for season 3. We will be back soon with a new season, soon, TM. And we'll let you know via our socials when that is happening. But that's going to do it for this season. So until next season, take care of yourself.
Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.